Welcome to Experiment Tracking with PyTorch. Now, experiment tracking is such an important topic in machine learning. You can consider this your first milestone project. So welcome to Milestone Project 1, Experiment Tracking with PyTorch. We're going to be putting everything we've learned so far together into one big project and track several experiments for our Food Vision mini project. But let's get started answering the most important question: where can you get help? The first thing you can do is to follow along with the code. If in doubt, run the code. If you're not sure of something, see what its inputs and outputs are. Try it for yourself. Press Shift Command and Space to read the docstring for help of any of the functions we're using. If you're still stuck, try searching for it. You'll probably come across Stack Overflow or the PyTorch documentation, which we've had plenty of hands-on practice with so far. Then of course, try again. If in doubt, run the code. And if you're still stuck, you can ask the question on the course discussions page. So you can click New Discussion here and then give some information about what you're working on. And then of course, the notebook we're going to be working through is number 7, PyTorch Experiment Tracking. You can find this notebook on GitHub. We're going to be referencing this throughout the series of videos coming up. And then of course, there's the book version of the notebook, which is searchable and has a bunch of different headings at learnpytorch.io, number 7 here, PyTorch Experiment Tracking. So let's jump back into the keynote. You might have the question, what is experiment tracking? So we've built a fair few models so far. We've started with tiny VGG. We saw that that didn't work. And then we tried the power of transfer learning in the last module, and we saw that did work pretty well. So experiment tracking is the answer to the question, how do I know which of my models has done the best? And so if you refer back to one of the beginning sections where we covered the how to approach this course, first and foremost is to code along, write the code, try it out, explore and experiment, visualize, ask questions, do the exercises, and of course, share your work. We have 3 mottos. If in doubt, run the code, experiment, 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 visualize, visualize, visualize. And so what we're going to be covering in this section is we're going to be diving deep into the experiment, experiment, experiment motto, and we're going to be tracking our experiments, more specifically, our modeling experiments with Food Vision Mini. So put on your scientist coat, let's get started. Now you might be wondering, why would we track experiments? And I've kind of hinted at this already, and we've seen it. If we were to build multiple different models, experiment tracking can quickly get out of hand. So let's say we started with number 0 and we tracked it in a dictionary called results. Then we had model 1 results, model 2, model 1 v2, model 2 v2, model 2 v3, model 2 v... Oh my goodness. And we just keep going. And I've cut it off here. And we've got a lot of experiments here. And you can see this is only 13 models. And in reality, you're going to be building a lot more than that when you start to work on your own machine learning projects. So it's important to have your experiment tracking in some form of reliable way that you can go back and investigate. So, how do you know which one of your models performs the best? Well, that's what we're going to answer the question with experiment tracking. So if all of these are like, no, 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 yes, number 11, and then no, 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 what should you do less of? And what should you try more of? That's the whole purpose of experiment tracking. Figure out what doesn't work so you can figure out what does work. Now, there are a few different ways to track experiments in PyTorch and machine learning in general. The first is what we've been doing so far, such as using Python dictionaries, CSV files, or printouts. The next is TensorBoard. We're going to be looking at this in this section because of how baked in it is to the PyTorch library. There's also other services like Weights and Biases, which is one of my favorite third-party experiment tracking resources. I'll let you look into that if you'd like. It's a beautiful user interface to track all of your different modeling experiments. For example, look at the accuracy measure there, the loss curves there, validation accuracy, how much GPU is being used. And then there's also libraries such as MLflow, which is an open source library for the entire machine learning workflow, essentially. And then, of course, because experiment tracking is such a large problem in machine learning, if you just searched track machine learning experiments, Let's just see what happens. Track machine learning experiments. What comes up? 15 best tools for machine learning experiment tracking. Oh, this is one of my favorite resources actually. This is in the extracurriculum section. Made with ML experiment tracking by the amazing Goku Mohandas. So this is your extracurriculum if you'd like to read up a little bit more about experiment tracking. In fact, I recommend all of Made with ML's resources. So go and check that out, especially this resource here. But let's jump back in. We've got a few places. We're going to be focusing on TensorBoard, but really the principles of experiment tracking that we're going to be going through are relatable to any service that you use. So this is what we're going to build. We're keeping going with Food Vision Mini. We're going to introduce experiment tracking. So say we ran a bunch of different modeling experiments. This is only 4 here. We're going to be running more than that. So 1 didn't work, 2 didn't work, number 3 works, and say, this is the results here. We've got some loss curves down here, some accuracy curves. We're going to see this in action. We're going to be writing code that we can generate something like this to build a series of models on our Food Vision Mini problem and see which one is the best. And to get a little bit more specific, here's what we're going to cover broadly. We're going to get set up, so importing our previously written code that we've done in last sections. We'll introduce experiment tracking with PyTorch and TensorFlow. We'll build several different modeling experiments for Food Vision Mini. We'll evaluate those modeling experiments with TensorBoard. And of course, we're going to be making predictions with the best performing model on our own custom data. And how? Well, we're going to be putting on our scientist's coat to track our experiments, but also our chef's hat because machine learning is part art, part science, so we're going to be cooking up lots of code. And speaking of, I'll see you in Google Colab. Let's code.